Hello Mind Mappers and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be going over Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday, one of my personal favorite authors, and I know a favorite author of a lot of people on this channel. Stillness is the Key is Ryan's first foray, in my eyes, into spiritual development. He's talked a lot about Stoicism and etc., but this book is a lot about spirituality, and it's an uncommon take on spirituality that I found really refreshing. Stillness is something that I've been working on for quite some time in my own life, and I feel like Ryan has just articulated it in a perfect way for me to bring it to you. Now, quick introduction. Who is Ryan Holiday? Now, if you don't already know, Ryan Holiday is a very prolific writer. He's written a ton of different books on wisdom, philosophy, and its place in our everyday lives. But he's also a sought-after speaker, strategist, and his best-selling books include Ego is the Enemy, The Obstacle is the Way, and The Daily Stoic, all of which I think would be well worth your time to read them or to listen to Ryan do them on Audible. All three are amazing books and have definitely changed the way that I view the world. Now, let's get into Stillness is the Key. The first quote that I pulled from the book is a general overview of what we're going to be learning today. I just want to say before we get into the book, there's a lot of names and phrases that are ancient. As we talked about it already, Ryan really focuses on ancient wisdom and philosophy. And because of that, there's a lot of words that, quite honestly, I'm not going to be able to pronounce. So if you find me skipping over sentences, I apologize. I'm simply not trying to not offend anyone. So, with that, let's get started. It wouldn't have mattered whether you were a pupil at the feet of Confucius in 500 BC, a student of the early Greek philosopher Democritus 100 years later, or sitting in Epicurus's garden a generation after that. You would have heard equally emphatic calls for unruffledness and tranquility. And now comes the entire paragraph that I can't really pronounce, but continuing on, he says that in English, stillness, to be steady while the world spins around you. And essentially he's saying that everyone is teaching this kind of thought of stillness, this thought of, in the English language, stillness. To hear only what needs to be heard, to possess quietude, exterior and interior, on command, to tap into the Tao and the Logos, the Word and the Way. Buddhism, Stoicism, Epicureanism, Christianity, and Hinduism, it's all but impossible to find a philosophical school or religion that does not venerate this inner peace, this stillness, as the highest good and the key to elite performance and a happy life. So I think what's so interesting is, as Ryan says here, there is a lot of different opinions in all of these different religions and ways of living and philosophies, but at the very highest, at the very top of all of their teachings, they talk about this stillness, this ability to hear only what needs to be heard, to possess a quietude, exterior and interior, on command, no matter what's going on around you. And when basically all the wisdom of the ancient world agrees on something, only a fool would decline to listen. And listening is exactly what we're going to be doing in this mind map. So what do you think of when you think of stillness? Seems like there's a lot of different opinions on it, right? Stillness means meditation or yoga or minimalism, so many different ways. Digital minimalism is one way people try to find stillness in their life. Stillness has been around forever and has taken many different forms. But inside this book, we're going to talk about so much more than just the many forms of stillness. Inside, we're going to talk about what stillness really is and why it's important. We're going to talk about why cultivating it is maybe the most important thing that you will ever do. And it's the highest calling in a lot of these different philosophies. We're also going to take on a practical version of how you can build it in your life so that it can't be broken. You can't be distracted by some of the noisiness of the outside world. This mind map is filled with what I think are important points of the book, but any book Ryan comes out with is worth reading and listening to. I recommend you pick this one up along with his other books. And while we're at that, a quick note on mind mapping. To get the most out of these mind maps, you can follow along. I have now created a guide on how you can mind map the exact same way that I'm mind mapping. So I put that guide all together, plus 50 of my other mind map templates, including this one. It's all at the link down below. So if you want to follow along, to learn more, remember better, and apply these books into your life, click that link down below. And with that, now that you guys are all back from clicking on that link, we're going to continue on. The first big idea that I pulled out is about the key. And I wanted to quickly point out, there's 2 yellow points, information diet and virtue. Those are the ones that I think are the most important points from the entire book, so stay tuned for those. The first point, the key. Vicksburg is the key. He, Lincoln, told the crowd, with the certainty of a man who had studied that matter so intensely that he could express it in the simplest of terms. The war can never be brought to a close until that key is in our pockets. This is really the origin of the key part of the title. As it happened, Lincoln turned out to be exactly right. It would take years. It would take an incredible equanimity and patience, as well as a ferocious commitment to his cause. But the strategy laid out in that room was what won the war and ended slavery in America forever. In his reflective, intuitive manner, without being rushed or distracted, Lincoln had seen and held fast to what his own advisors and even his enemy had missed. Because he possessed the key that unlocked victory from the rancor and folly of the early competing plans, in our own lives, we face seemingly equal number of problems and are pulled in countless directions by competing priorities and beliefs in the way of everything we hope to accomplish. Personally and professionally sit obstacles and enemies. Martin Luther King Jr. observed that there was a violent civil war raging within each and every person, between our good and bad impulses, between our ambitions and our principles, between what we can be and how hard it is to actually get there. In those battles, in that war, stillness is the river and the railroad junction through which so much depends. It is the key. Stillness is the key to, well, just about everything. To being a better parent, a better artist, a better investor, a better athlete, a better scientist, a better human being, to unlocking all that we are capable of in this life. So we can see how important stillness is in almost every area of our lives. Stillness to me is certainty and focus. Imagine all the problems and battles and competing priorities Lincoln had during that time. I mean, no one would have blamed him for skipping from one thing to another, one battle, one problem, one whatever it is, to another, without really focusing on this one thing that he knew was going to win him the war. Everyone, in fact, would have probably expected him to do that because that's what everyone else was probably doing. But that's what made him great. He had a vision of what he knew needed to be accomplished, and not only that, he simply set out to just accomplish that thing. He didn't let the problems he saw before him distract him from his ultimate vision. That right there is what helped him win the war, and that right there is what Ryan Holiday calls stillness. So here's my invitation to you. Think about your vision. What are the problems that come up? What are the competing priorities that you might have? Have you let these things get you sidetracked? I know from many coaching calls with a lot of you guys that there's a lot of you out there that have a vision, something you want to accomplish, a business you want to create, a job that you want to get, and etc. But what ends up happening is, in this increasingly noisy world, it's hard to tell the signal from the noise. And quite often what ends up happening with a lot of you out there, and by all means with me sometimes as well, is that the noise ends up being so loud that you can't tune into your vision. So you'll start trying different things here and there, and you'll get sidetracked by a lot of different competing priorities. And because of that, you're not going to be able to actually accomplish what you want to accomplish. You can think about Lincoln in a time like that, when you're feeling a little bit distracted, and know that you need to get back on track. So with that, here's a quick story about a coaching client. I recently spoke with a young woman who had a dream. She wanted to be a designer for high-class websites. But when we spoke, she was doing so many different things. She was a really great designer, and she offered to design a website for me, and I had to say no because I don't really need a really high-class website like she has, and I didn't want to take up too much of her time. But she was doing so many different other things. She was doing social media management, copywriting, Facebook ads, probably a million different things that she didn't even actually tell me that she was doing. But here's the problem. She was constantly switching from one thing to another, even though she knew that the one thing that she would really get the most value out of was high-class websites for customers who got a lot of visits and did a lot of business through their website. That's the number one thing she wanted to do. That was her most valuable asset that she possibly could deliver to the world as well. When we spoke, I demonstrated how important it is to have a vision in mind and be ready to say no to literally everything other than that thing. One of my mentors calls it the idea fairy, and as soon as you have a vision, the idea fairy comes around. And that fairy always comes around when you set out to accomplish that goal. It's really just the ego as a way of distracting you from your true calling. Stillness is the key to not let that happen. And essentially what you need to do is every time that something comes up that isn't your vision, that isn't your dream, or that isn't contributing to your vision or your dream, you need to call that what it is. That's the idea fairy. And you have to say no to the idea fairy. And I thought that that was a great way to really cut through some of the noise that there is out there in the modern world. The next point is one of the main points that I picked out, and that's about information diet. The quote from the book says, "It is in this stillness that we can be present and finally see the truth. It is in this stillness that we can hear the voice inside of us." How different would the world look if people spent as much time listening to their conscience as they did to chattering broadcasts? If they could respond to the calls of their convictions as quickly as we answer the dings and rings of technology in our pockets. Now, it's very interesting. We just did a book review on Cal Newport's Digital Minimalism, and I recommend that you go and check that out after you're done this book, because a lot of this is kind of overlapping. All this noise, all this information, all these inputs, we are afraid of the silence. We are afraid of looking stupid. We are afraid of missing out. We are afraid of being the bad guy who says, nope, not interested. We'd rather make ourselves miserable than make ourselves a priority, than to be our best selves, than to be still and to be in charge of our own information diet. Now, quick story. I actually was afraid of quiet for quite a long time. And I ended up working with a coach, and we went over how I was constantly plugged in. This was a couple of years ago. I was constantly plugged in. Podcasts, YouTube, social media, work, whatever it was, I was always stimulated. And I was really having a hard time getting quiet. But I'll tell you right now, all the books that I've read, all of the courses that I've done, all the personal development I've done, taking quiet time on a daily basis was the number one thing that helped me feel better in my life, helped me be more productive, and really just contributed to literally everything that I have going on in my life. So my question for you is, can you even hear the voice that's inside of you? This point really hit home for me, and I'm assuming that I'm probably going to tell you the same story exactly. Amazing source of information, the internet, we've all done that before. Human beings are better creators than we are computers. This is another interesting point that I worked through with my coach. Storing more information is not going to make you feel better. In fact, it's going to bog down the computer. It's going to bog down your brain. Creating something with that information, listening to your own compass, feeling out your own true path, that's the key to a better life and to feeling better within your life. So why do you think I make these mind maps? Making these mind maps and the videos I create here takes way more time than actually reading the book does. It's about 2 for 1. So for one time it takes me to read the book, it takes me 2 times to make the mind maps and to make the videos. But it allows me to connect them to my real life. It allows me to understand why this information is important. And however, it also shows me how to say no to a lot of information. This is an important point, and if you pick up my How to Mind Map guide, you're going to know this. These mind maps have less than 5% of all the information available in these books, and that's for a reason. That's because, not because that the other 95% might not be important for other people, but this 5% is the stuff that I think is important for me and the stuff that I think is important for you, my audience. And everything else is just the noise. Really what you guys come here for is not for the book. You're coming for me to cut through the noise and deliver you directly to the signal. And that's a really powerful point. Continuing on to our next big point is write shit down. It's a very interesting point, and I think a lot of us probably aren't utilizing this in our everyday life. He says in the book, Anne Frank used her journal to reflect. How noble and good everyone could be, she wrote, if at the end of the day they were to review their own behavior and weigh up the wrongs and the rights. They would automatically try to do better at the start of each new day and, after a while, would certainly accomplish a great deal. This is what journaling is all about. It's a spiritual windshield wiper, as the writer Julia Cameron once put it. It's a few-minute reflection that both demands and creates stillness. It's a break from the world, a framework for the day ahead, a coping mechanism for the troubles of the hours just past, a revving up of your creative juices and relaxing and clearing. Once, twice, 3 times a day, whatever. Just find what works for you. Just know that it might turn out to be the most important thing that you do all day. Journaling as a way to create stillness. Now, within the book, there's multiple different ways that you can help cultivate stillness, but journaling was the most interesting one for me, because journaling for me has been a game changer. I hope most of you are already doing it, but if you're not, you should start. How should you do it? As Ryan says here, who really cares? I write in mine once in the morning and once at night, plus it sits down on my desk. It's right beside me right now during the day. But again, who cares? Only have time for one a day, that's fine. Only have time for audio notes, that's perfect. If you can only write maybe even just once a week, at least you're doing that. Taking time out of your day to create stillness and reflect back on what's been going on. Very, very important. Because through journaling, we can take an impartial look into our own lives. This is a tool that allows us to see where we're really at. And it allows us to see where we're already doing good and where we could potentially improve. Just the process of writing this stuff down gives us a lot of stillness. Journaling helps us stop beating ourselves up. It allows us to see where we're making the same mistakes time and time again. And one big one for me, it allows me to see how good I'm actually doing. Often I find myself disappointed with my days. I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate, only to journal at the end of the day and realize how much I really got done. Journaling has even helped me even out my expectations of myself, which is something I definitely struggle with. I set expectations far too high and get disappointed when I don't reach them. The next point, very interesting point, is about virtue. Now, this is something that Marcus Aurelius talks about, and in fact, the quote goes like this. Marcus Aurelius famously described a number of what he called epitaphs for the self. Among his were upright, modest, straightforward, sane, cooperative. These were then the traits that served him well as emperor. So you can see he kind of had a list of what he wanted to uphold in himself. There are many other traits that could be added to this list. For example, honest, patient, caring, kind, brave, calm, firm, generous, forgiving, righteous. There's one word, however, under which all of these epitaphs sit: virtue. Virtue, the Stoics believed, was the highest good, the summum bonum, and should be the principle behind all of our actions. Virtue is not holiness, but rather moral and civic excellence in the course of our daily life. It's a sense of pure righteousness that emerges from our souls and is made real through the actions that we take. It's a very interesting thing. We're going to work on applying this to our everyday lives in the mind map part below. This is one of the most exciting parts of the book for me. The East prized virtue as much as the West. The Tao Te Ching, for instance, actually translates as the way of virtue. Confucius, who advised many of the rulers and princes of his day, would have agreed with Marcus that a leader was well served by the pursuit of virtue. His highest compliment would have been to call a ruler a junzu, a word that translators have still have trouble finding equivalents for in English, but it's roughly understood as a person who emanates integrity, honor, and self-control. So the question I have for you is, what standard do you hold yourself to? And do you have any standards that you hold yourself to? I think it's a great way to look and think at personal development, right? Instead of do this or hack that, what if we just asked ourselves, who do I want to be? What standards would that person have? How could I go about living up to those standards? And Ryan says this in the book as well. Each of us must cultivate a moral code, a higher standard that we love almost more than life itself. Each of us must sit down and ask, what's important to me? What would I rather die than betray? And how am I going to live today? These are not idle questions or the banal queries of a personality quiz. We must have the answers if we want to have stillness in the strength that emerges from the citadel of our own virtue. So let's think about this. What's important to you? Is it important to be honest? Is it important to be patient? Is it important to be caring, kind, brave, calm, any of those things? What would you rather die than betray? Would you rather die than lie to someone that you love? Would you rather die than potentially try to find something that's modest or trying to find something that's brave. In one sense, it's really not what would you rather die than betray. It's more like, what is so important to you that you are willing to kind of forego some of the pleasures that some of these not doing some of these virtues might give you. And then how am I going to live today? Basically, how am I going to take those virtues and put them into my own life? Now, after you have those, after you have them written down, after you have them in mind, you want to write them down. Maybe you want to get a tattoo, whatever you need to do. But really what you need to do is to live these virtues. And the reason I say get a tattoo is because if you didn't know this, Ryan Holiday basically gets a tattoo of every one of his books that he's written. I thought it was a very interesting way. He has Ego is the Enemy on one arm. He has The Obstacle is the Way on the other arm. And I'm sure he probably has Stillness on even another part of his body. The final point that we're going to come to today is the domain of the body. The quote goes like this. As Paul Johnson, one of Churchill's best biographers, would write, the balance he maintained between flat-out work and creativity and restorative leisure is worth study by anyone holding a top position. Johnson, as a 17-year-old, decades before his own career as a writer, met Churchill on the street and shouted at him, "Sir, to what do you attribute your success in life?" Immediately Churchill replied, "Conservation of energy. Never stand up when you can sit down and never sit down when you can lie down." Churchill conserved his energy so that he never shirked from a task or backed down from a challenge. So that, for all this work and pushing, he never burnt himself out or snuffed out that spark of joy that made life worth living. Indeed, in addition to the importance of hard work, Johnson said that other 4 lessons from Churchill's remarkable life were to aim high, to never allow mistakes or criticism to get you down, to waste no energy on grudges, duplicity, or infighting, and to make room for joy. Even during the war, Churchill never lost his sense of humor, never lost sight of what was beautiful in the world, and never became jaded or cynical. And really, Churchill was an amazing man. Many of the books that we've read already on the channel have referenced him. But while you might think of Churchill as an amazing man and etc., you might not think of him as the poster child for health. He was kind of a big, fat man. But he was extremely prolific, which is even more interesting to me. He served in office for 6+ decades, wrote over 40 books, painted more than 500 paintings. You see, this stuff takes a lot of energy. And yeah, he might not eat the best food, he might have drank too much, and etc. Life was a lot different back then. We don't necessarily need to think of him as the picture of health, but man, did he ever have a lot of energy to be able to do those things. I can't even imagine writing over 40 books, let alone doing that as well as serving in office and painting over 500 paintings. That is just insane. Maybe it's a good idea to listen to what he has to say on energy. So take time to rest. Don't be constantly trying to push yourself forward. Don't let yourself get burnt out by the sheer grind of your day to day. And I think that maybe reading between the lines, one of the reasons that Ryan put this in is because his books, Ego is the Enemy and The Obstacle is the Way, have maybe attracted, I should say, some people that are the people who are willing to kind of burn the candle at both ends, are willing to push pretty hard to get what they want. And I guess he's just giving us a call to stillness. Those of us that are hard charging and hard working, he's just really giving us a call to stillness here at the end of the book, and I personally appreciate that. But most of all, don't let criticisms and mistakes get you down. Waste no energy on grudges or infighting. So thanks so much for being with me here today. I hope you guys download this mind map and make it your own. Put your own stories in there. Put your own thoughts and put your own learnings from the mind mapping. I would really love to see some of your mind maps. If you want to send me an email or send me a Facebook message and etc., I would really love to see what you guys are doing with mind maps out there. I appreciate you guys for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.